Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every person's life when the chaos around them stops being an inconvenience and becomes a threat to their potential. Too many people wake up every day reacting to life rather than directing it, buried under clutter, overwhelmed by responsibilities, drowning in unfinished plans, and wondering why their dreams feel out of reach. But here is a truth that is uncomfortable, uncompromising, and liberating. If you want to change your life, you must first force yourself to organize it, not when you feel motivated, not when life slows down, not when the universe finally gives you time. Now, because disorder doesn't just waste space, it erodes dignity, it robs you of clarity, energy, and ambition. It keeps you trapped in cycles of delay, distraction, and self-doubt. People don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they lack structure. They don't lose momentum because they're incapable. They lose it because they leave their life to chance. Organization is not about perfection. It is about power. It is about claiming responsibility for the physical, mental, and emotional environment that shapes every decision you make. When you clean your space, you clean your mind. When you track your goals, you command your direction. When you structure your time, you reclaim your future. The process may be uncomfortable. It will expose your habits, your excuses, your weaknesses. But that discomfort is the catalyst of evolution. Too many people wait for a miracle, when in reality, the miracle is discipline. The miracle is strategy. The miracle is waking up and saying, I refuse to live another day on autopilot. Because when you organize your life, you organize your potential. You turn chaos into order, anxiety into clarity, scattered time into focused intention, and the world begins to respond to you differently. Not because it changed, but because you did. So stop waiting for confidence to appear. Stop waiting for motivation to knock on your door. Force yourself to organize your life now, and the courage, clarity, and confidence you seek will follow, not through magic, but through mastery. Because when you take command of your environment, you take command of your destiny. Organization creates clarity, because the physical and mental environments we live in constantly influence how we think, feel, and behave, even when we are not consciously aware of it. Clutter, disorder, and unfinished tasks act as open loops in the mind, continuously drawing attention, generating cognitive fatigue, and creating a subtle but persistent sense of unease. When someone is surrounded by disorganization, the brain is forced to process excess stimuli, shifting between competing demands and unresolved reminders, which consumes mental energy and reduces available bandwidth for meaningful work. A structured environment minimizes this noise, allowing the mind to focus on one task at a time without being disrupted by visual or psychological distractions. This simplification of the environment results in a noticeable sense of clarity, calm, and mental spaciousness. Reducing stress through organization is not merely a matter of preference, but a neurological reality. Humans are wired to seek predictability, control, and pattern recognition, and environments that reflect order help satisfy that need. When a person knows where things are, what needs to be done, and how tasks are prioritized, the brain experiences less uncertainty, which in turn reduces the cortisol spikes associated with chaos and overwhelm. This shift is powerful because stress does not only hinder emotional well-being, it directly compromises memory, decision-making, and concentration. By organizing external surroundings, individuals are essentially regulating their internal state, creating conditions in which their nervous system can operate more efficiently and with less tension. Mental focus increases in organized environments because the mind is not fragmented across multiple unfinished tasks or constantly switching attention between unrelated stimuli. When distractions are removed, attention becomes deeper, more sustained, and more productive. This kind of focus is essential for high-level thinking because complex tasks require uninterrupted cognitive flow. In disorganized settings, the brain struggles to reach that state, often defaulting to shallow engagement, procrastination, or impulsive task switching. A structured environment encourages intentional behavior, allowing individuals to prioritize tasks based on importance rather than urgency or anxiety. Organization also provides clarity through the psychological effect of visible progress. When surroundings are clean, schedules are defined, and goals are outlined, individuals can see evidence of control and direction, which fosters motivation and confidence. This external order reinforces internal discipline, creating a feedback loop where clarity leads to action and action reinforces clarity. As the mind adapts to this structured approach, mental clutter decreases, problem solving becomes faster, and time is used more deliberately. Ultimately, organization functions as a tool for cognitive optimization, enabling the brain to operate with greater efficiency, stability, and purpose. Discipline fuels progress because it turns intentions into reliable action, allowing individuals to move forward consistently rather than sporadically. When someone chooses to organize their life on a regular basis, rather than only when they feel motivated, they develop a predictable pattern of behavior that reinforces commitment and accountability. Discipline removes randomness from personal growth and replaces it with structure, which is essential for long-term progress. People often underestimate how much chaos, indecision, and procrastination drain energy and time. Consistent organization eliminates those barriers by creating routines, systems, and habits that automate effort and make progress more sustainable. Each small act of organization, repeated over time, becomes evidence that a person can follow through, and that evidence is the foundation of self-trust. Self-trust is one of the most powerful outcomes of discipline because it changes the way a person perceives themselves and their potential. When someone repeatedly keeps promises to themselves, like cleaning their space, prioritizing tasks, or following a schedule, they reinforce the belief that they are capable of managing their life. This internal credibility affects confidence, motivation, and resilience. People often fail not because they lack ability, but because they don't trust their capacity to maintain effort. Discipline directly addresses this by proving day after day that effort is possible even when it isn't convenient. Over time, this reliability becomes part of a person's identity, shifting them from someone who trays into someone who executes consistently. Personal momentum emerges from this sustained follow-through. Progress becomes easier when effort becomes habitual rather than forced. Each organized task completed reduces friction for the next task, creating a sense of movement and control. Momentum is psychological, but it is also practical. Organized environments simplify work, save time, reduce decision fatigue, and increase efficiency. When someone knows where things are, what needs to be done, and how to do it, they spend less energy battling confusion and more energy moving ahead. That forward motion compounds over time, turning small, consistent improvements into significant transformation. Discipline also fuels progress by stabilizing motivation. Emotional highs and lows are unpredictable, and people who rely solely on inspiration will always struggle with inconsistency. Discipline bridges the gap between intention and achievement by removing the need to feel like it every day. When organization becomes routine, progress no longer depends on mood. The very act of showing up regardless of circumstances generates momentum that produces its own motivation. As progress accumulates, a person begins to see tangible results, less clutter, fewer unfinished tasks, greater efficiency, and these outcomes reinforce both self-trust and the desire to continue. Discipline becomes a self-sustaining cycle where effort produces progress, Progress produces belief, and belief fuels further effort. Structure empowers purpose, because goals without systems are merely wishes, easily abandoned when life becomes busy, stressful, or uncertain. Many people have ambitions, dreams, and meaningful intentions, but their energy is dispersed across too many directions, making progress fragmented and inconsistent. Without structure, goals remain abstract ideas floating in the mind rather than concrete actions integrated into daily life. Systems and routines provide the framework that translates vision into reality by creating predictable pathways for effort, accountability, and measurable progress. They bridge the gap between what someone wants to accomplish and what they actually do every day, replacing randomness with intentionality. When an individual establishes routines, they create stability in behavior, allowing effort to compound over time. Scattered goals are often overwhelming because there is no clear sequence of steps, and the brain becomes fatigued by constant decision making about where to begin. A structured system reduces this cognitive load by automating decisions and building habits that support consistent execution. Instead of relying on willpower or motivation, a person follows a process that generates progress whether they feel inspired or not. This reliability turns ambition into discipline, eliminating the paralysis that comes from overthinking and indecision. Systems also bring clarity to priorities by organizing tasks based on importance rather than urgency. Without structure, people tend to react to immediate demands or emotional impulses, neglecting long-term goals in favor of short-term distractions. A structured approach forces alignment between daily actions and core purpose, ensuring that time and energy are invested where they matter most. By scheduling tasks, breaking goals into steps, and tracking progress, individuals gain a tangible sense of movement toward their objectives. This clarity not only boosts productivity but also enhances motivation because progress becomes visible and measurable. Purpose becomes powerful when it is expressed through consistent action rather than fleeting aspiration. Systems reinforce this purpose by embedding it into everyday life, transforming goals from abstract concepts into lived practice. Over time, routines shape identity. Someone becomes organized because they organize, becomes disciplined because they act with discipline, and becomes purposeful because they consistently act on purpose. Structure also increases resilience because it provides a stable foundation that remains functional even when emotional state, external circumstances, or motivation fluctuate. Ultimately, structure empowers purpose by giving form to intention. It turns scattered goals into achievable outcomes by creating a roadmap that guides effort, reduces uncertainty, and builds momentum. When goals are organized into systems, they stop competing for mental space and start moving in a unified direction, enabling individuals to live with focus, follow through, and a sense of meaningful progress. Environment shapes identity because the spaces we occupy and the mental landscapes we maintain constantly signal to the brain what kind of behavior is possible, acceptable, and expected. Physical and mental clutter create environments of disorder, and those environments silently dictate how a person perceives themselves and their capabilities. When someone lives in a space filled with unfinished tasks, messy surroundings, and chaotic energy, they internalize that disorder as part of their identity. The brain learns to expect distraction, confusion, and low standards, which gradually erodes confidence, suppresses ambition, and narrows creativity. People often believe they are unmotivated or unfocused, when in reality they are reacting to an environment that makes focus and ambition difficult to sustain. Clutter limits confidence because it reinforces a sense of lack of control. When someone constantly sees mess, disorganization, and unresolved problems around them, they absorb subtle messages of failure and inadequacy. The mind interprets clutter as a visual reminder of tasks not completed, goals not followed through, and responsibilities neglected, creating guilt and self-doubt. Confidence grows when a person experiences mastery and agency over their environment. By contrast, clutter signals helplessness, telling the brain that change is overwhelming or impossible. This can create a cycle where the environment reinforces negative beliefs, and those beliefs keep the environment unchanged. Ambition is also hindered by clutter because ambition thrives in clarity, vision, and psychological spaciousness. When the environment is chaotic, the mind becomes preoccupied with managing disorder rather than imagining possibilities. Goals feel distant because immediate distractions dominate mental attention. Even when ambition exists intellectually, the physical environment makes execution difficult, reducing energy and persistence. People underestimate how much motivation is tied to cues in the environment. Clean, organized spaces cue action, while chaotic ones cue avoidance. When someone is surrounded by clutter, ambition becomes a concept rather than a lived drive because the environment constantly interrupts momentum. Creativity is restricted by clutter because creativity requires space, mental space, visual space, emotional space. A cluttered environment overloads sensory input, leaving less cognitive bandwidth for imagination or innovative thinking. The brain constantly filters irrelevant stimuli, preventing deep, associative thinking that fuels creativity. Clutter also traps the mind in the past, as objects serve as reminders of unresolved tasks or outdated versions of identity, rather than inviting new perspectives or experimentation. Creative thinking flourishes when the mind feels open, energized, and able to explore without constraint. Organization does not eliminate creativity. It amplifies it by removing obstacles that suffocate curiosity and spontaneous insight. Ultimately, environment shapes identity because it communicates expectations to the brain. Clutter trains the mind to operate in survival mode, while organized, intentional spaces enable confidence, ambition, and creative expression to emerge as natural extensions of self. Action beats motivation because waiting to feel ready before starting anything places success in the hands of emotion, which is unstable, unpredictable, and easily influenced by fatigue, fear, or distraction. People often believe that motivation is the fuel for progress, but motivation is more accurately a result of progress. The moment someone requires inspiration before acting, they create a barrier between intention and execution, making productivity dependent on mood rather than commitment. This mindset keeps individuals stuck because emotions rarely align perfectly with responsibility. If meaningful action depended on feeling inspired, very little of value would ever be accomplished. Forcing action, even when motivation is absent, rewires the brain to associate effort with identity rather than emotion, building capability through repetition and exposure. Taking action in moments of resistance trains the mind to tolerate discomfort, uncertainty, and imperfection. One of the reasons people delay action is the belief that readiness will remove these internal obstacles, but readiness is often a myth constructed to avoid vulnerability. Capability does not emerge because conditions are perfect. It emerges because someone repeatedly practices while conditions are inconvenient or difficult. When a person forces themselves to act, they learn how to navigate friction, and that skill becomes a foundation for resilience. The experience of getting something done without the emotional desire to do it is empowering because it proves that the individual can transcend impulse and operate according to principle. Action also generates momentum, which creates its own motivation. The human brain is wired to favor continuation over initiation. Starting a task is often the hardest part because it requires overcoming inertia. However, once action begins, psychological resistance decreases and focus increases. Progress, even in small increments, triggers a sense of accomplishment and stimulates dopamine, making continued effort more appealing. Motivation appears not as a prerequisite for work, but as a reward for work. This shift dismantles the belief that inspiration must precede effort and replaces it with the understanding that effort produces inspiration. Capability grows through repetition, not waiting. Skills sharpen, clarity deepens, and confidence builds when a person consistently performs actions aligned with their goals. Over time, the act of forcing oneself to begin becomes automated, reducing reliance on emotional fluctuation. People who take action regardless of motivation become competent faster because they are accumulating practice rather than collecting excuses. Progress becomes a consequence of identity, someone who acts rather than someone who waits. This identity shift is crucial because capability is not built by avoiding discomfort. It is built by engaging with it repeatedly until it loses its power to control behavior. Order transforms potential because potential on its own is dormant energy, a possibility rather than a guarantee. Many people possess talent, intelligence, or ambition, yet never see those qualities translate into meaningful achievement because their lives lack structure, systems, and consistent behavior. Without organization, potential remains scattered, unfocused, and reactive, constantly interrupted by distraction, procrastination, and emotional turbulence. Order provides the container that harnesses potential and channels it into productive action. By organizing physical space, time, priorities, and responsibilities, individuals create an environment in which effort can be applied efficiently and consistently. This coherence eliminates wasted energy, reduces cognitive overload, and increases the likelihood that goals will move from intention to completion. Productivity is unlocked by order because productivity depends less on working harder and more on eliminating friction. Disorganized environments and chaotic routines create constant friction, forcing the brain to repeatedly make decisions, search for resources, and recover from interruptions. Each distraction drains mental energy and disrupts focus, leading to shallow work and inconsistent output. In an organized life, tasks are streamlined, materials are accessible, and priorities are clear, allowing time and energy to be invested directly into meaningful progress. Systems such as schedules, task lists, and routines transform productivity from an unpredictable event into a repeatable process. People become capable of sustaining momentum because they are no longer fighting their environment, they are supported by it. Resilience is strengthened through order because resilience requires stability, clarity, and recovery. Chaos contributes to stress and overwhelm by constantly activating a sense of urgency and threat. When life is organized, challenges feel manageable rather than catastrophic, and the individual has the capacity to respond with patience rather than panic. Order also supports emotional resilience by creating predictable rhythms and boundaries that protect energy and reduce burnout. When obligations are tracked, time is allocated, and environments are maintained, the mind feels grounded, which increases tolerance for uncertainty and pressure. Resilience grows when a person repeatedly experiences themselves navigating life competently, and order facilitates that experience. Long-term success is supported by order because success demands consistent effort over extended periods rather than sporadic bursts of enthusiasm. Organized lives foster consistency by reducing barriers to execution and reinforcing productive habits. Systems make it easier to start, easier to continue, and harder to regress. Over time, this steady accumulation of progress compounds, turning modest daily improvement into significant results. Order does not remove challenges or eliminate the need for effort. It simply ensures that potential is not wasted through disorganization, distraction, or emotional chaos. When life is organized, talent becomes usable, ambition becomes strategic, and time becomes an ally rather than an enemy.